Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to go through an example that covers the Python topics from week 1. Now, if you open up the course schedule, you will see that this is week 1. We covered in the lesson video introduction, operating system commands, and environment setup, as well as some Python basics, including conditionals and loops. The reading for this week is Miller and Raynham, Chapter 1. Please be sure to read this chapter. It will greatly help you learn Python. Now we're going to cover some code examples that work with these lessons and this reading. So go ahead and open up Spyder or your IDE that you're going to use. I encourage you to follow along. It will help greatly. If I'm moving too fast or you need some more time for something, then feel free to pause the video and catch up. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new file. So click New File. And let's save this file. Navigate to My Computer Science 215 Scripts folder. And I'm going to call this Guess My Number. So we're going to implement a program to play a simple game called Guess My Number. We're going to randomly generate a number for the user of our program, the player, to guess, and we are going to prompt the user to guess numbers until they guess the correct number. Now, we can give hints to the user about whether their guess is too high or too low, and we can also restrict the range at which they can guess in. That way, they're not making guesses that are outside of the range in which we generated our random number. So, some things to note about getting started with our new Python file is by default, Spyder inserts this comment block up here. When you write code for programming assignments and micro assignments, you will want to add to this comment block as per the Computer Science 215 coding standard. So let's take a look at the coding standard just for good practice. So the coding standard says that at the top of every file, there should be a comment block that specifies your name, the class, the programming assignment, the date, and a description of what the program does. You can do this using single line comments. In Python, this is the pound or the hashtag sign. This would be similar to // in C and Java. And you could also specify this with a comment block, so this would be triple single or triple double quotes. This would relate to the /* and // in the C family of languages, including C and Java. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a main function. Now, every function we write should have a comment block immediately under the header, the function header. This specifies the doc string. So if someone were to call help on the identifier main in guessmynumber.py, the module, whatever text we put in here, such as this is the doc string for main, would be displayed. So we learned how to use help for an identifier in IPython in a previous video. So for now, I'm just going to put pass. Pass is a reserved keyword in Python that pretty much just says do nothing. It's a no-op. And then I will call main. Okay, so one of the first things I need to do is generate a number for the user to guess. So I always name my functions with a verb so that I know this is an identifier for a function. So generate random number, and maybe I'll specify start and stopping values. So I'm going to import random to gain access to the random module, so I can call either randint or randrange, the function, to generate a random number in the range start to stop, and let's say those are both inclusive. So let's have random is assigned random.randint from start to stop, and that's inclusive. And just for practice, I'm going to also write an alternative line using rand range, and this is from start to stop plus 1 because the stopping value is exclusive. And then we return rand num. So every time we write a little bit of code, we should test it. So let's have a variable called num to guess. This is going to store the return value from a call to generate random number. And let's pass in a start value of 1 and a stop value of 10. So they're going to guess a random number in the range 1 through 10 inclusive. And let's print out num to guess just to make sure that everything looks good. Okay, so the random number generated was 8. We run it again, we will likely get a different number, 3. Awesome. So next step is we need to prompt the user to enter a number. Let's say get number from user. And I'm going to pass in the starting and stopping values so that I could give them a very informative prompt. So let's say num is assigned an integer from input. By default, input returns a string. Please enter a number in the range %d, %d. Okay, let's run this. Say user's guess is assigned the return value from a call to get number from user, passing in start and stop. Okay, and I'll enter in say 5. Okay, so far so good. Now I want to return to line number 22, and I want to show you a few different ways that you could write line number 22. Now I've combined my prompt with my call to input. So my prompt is a string that is an argument to input. But I could actually break this up into 2 lines, and you may see this, so I want you to be familiar with it. So I could just print directly. Please enter number in the range, and then call input to get the value, the string from the user, and convert that to an integer. Now, I'll run this. Enter in 5. Okay. Now let me show you a few different ways you could use print. So right now I'm using a C-style approach to using print like you would with printf with placeholders, so %d for placeholders for integers. But there are a few more Pythonic ways that we could do this. So the first I'll show you is with string concatenation. So we'll say please enter a number in the range, and we'll concatenate to this string another string, which is the string representation of the integer start, plus, comma space, plus the string representation of the integer stop. And now one more way I'll show you how to do this is with a comma separated list of values. So we'll print the string, and then we'll print start, and then we'll print our comma space, and then we'll print stop. And lastly, on the end, I'm going to have the string to close out my hard bracket. Okay, So the first two are going to look really similar, but the third one's going to look slightly different. So the third one looks slightly different because by default, spaces are inserted in between values in this comma-separated list of arguments to print. So instead, what I can do is I can set sep, the keyword of print, to the empty string, and then that space separator will not be inserted, and they look the same. Okay, so let's comment out lines 23 and 24 because we don't need to have 3 prompts for our user, unnecessary. Okay, so now we have the number to guess, we have the user's guess. Let's compare and see if they're correct. If they're not correct, then we want to tell them, are they too high or are they too low? So if user's guess is equivalent to num to guess, we want to print nice job, you got it, or something along those lines. If user's guess is greater than num to guess, then we want to say, too bad, you are too high. And then lastly, we'll print out, too bad, you are too low. Now I like to put a comment on my else that says, what is the Boolean condition that would cause this else body to execute? So that would be the conjunction of the negation of all the previous Boolean conditions. So that would be user's guess is not equal to num to guess, and user's guess is less than or equal to num to guess. And I can change this to strictly less than because I know that user's guess is not equal to the number to guess. Okay, so let's try it. So the number to guess is 5, so let's guess 5. And it says, nice job, you got it. Number to guess is 1, so let's do 4, and it says you're too high. Let's just guess it again. Try and get a higher number. There we go. So we can do 8, which will say too low. Okay, so we're getting some functionality here, but really the game is far from complete because we can only guess one time. Now, the user should be able to guess until they guess correctly, right? And the hints will help them figure out what the number is. So we need to add a loop in order to repeat this code while the user has not correctly guessed the number. We're going to use a while loop to do this because we do not know in advance how many times the loop is going to run. If we knew in advance how many times the loop was going to run, we could use a for loop. But we just don't know how many guesses the user is going to need to get this number. So we're going to indent all this code and slap on a while loop in front of it. And we'll say for our Boolean condition, while user's guess is not equal to num to guess. Now, I need to specify what user's guess is. So I'm just going to set it to something that's invalid, -1, so that I will execute this loop at least one time. Now, a few things you're going to notice in Python that are going to be hard habits to break is you're going to want to use curly braces in order to group code together like this from your Java and your C background. No, we don't do that in Python. In Python, code blocks are indented to group them together. Some people love this, some people hate it. No matter how you feel about it, it is the way it is. And my advice is if you ever get to the point where it's really starting to bother you, meaning you have indentation levels that are getting quite deep, take a step back, look at your code, ask yourself, is there any way that I could restructure this so that it's not so nested? And there typically is going to be a way. And I have similar advice related to function definitions. If your function is ever so long, you have to scroll to see all of the body, then your function is too long and you need to break it up into a more modular design. Our general rule of thumb is one task represents one algorithm, which is coded up in one function. So your function should be, cohesive, they should be coherent, and they should not be so long that you have to scroll to see all of the text. Since you've already had 2 programming courses before this one, you've already adopted, many different conventions and styles and idiosyncrasies, and as long as those are good habits, then you can continue doing those, but make sure that you're always practicing good code. Okay, so let's try running this now in our loop. So the number to guess is 7, so let's do 6. It says I'm too low and it prompts me again. Let's do 8, too high, and then let's guess the number correctly, which is 7, and it says you got it. So perfect. Now, this game is still not complete. There are 2 things that we should add. The first thing we should add is some input validation. So in our code, get number from user, we tell them to enter a number in the range 1 through 10, but we don't enforce this. So let's add some code to enforce this. Let's indent our prompt and our call to input in a while loop, and we'll say while num is equivalent to -1. And let's set num to -1. So now as soon as we get num from the user, we need to test. Is num out of range, meaning it is less than start, or it is greater than stop? If so, we need to tell the user, hey, this is an invalid number. Please try again. And we'll set num to -1 so that our Boolean condition is true. So let's try it. Please enter number in the range 1 through 10. Let's do 0, invalid number. Let's try 11, invalid number. Let's try our correct number, 9. Awesome. The next thing that I would recommend adding to this would be a menu, so that once the user correctly guesses the number, the program doesn't end. Instead, the program will ask them, do you want to play again? I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you to complete. My advice is, once this video ends, go ahead and add this menu to reprompt the user if they want to play again right now while you have momentum working on this problem. So with that, keep practicing the week 1 topics, and the next video is going to cover the first assignment in Computer Science 215, micro assignment number 1. I will see you in that video.